Hey, so welcome to another episode of Subscription Radio. Today, my guest is a I'd say it's a longtime friend, known each other for a while. Matt Bahr, who's the founder and CEO of Fairing, formerly known as EnquireLabs. He was joking that still getting to that point of, I think you'll be happy when at least 50% of people are still calling you by your new name.
Yeah. Oh no, it's
Not your old
exciting.
one.
We talked to like new customers who have never heard of Enquire, and that's the most exciting
Right,
cohort right now. Is someone who
right,
just
right.
starts their fairing is just like literally rolling off their tongue. I'm like, you've never said Enquire before, have you?
Right.
So super excited to be here though. Happy excited
Oh,
to chat. And yeah, I think you
no
alluded to it
doubt.
before. It was Think Coffee on I think Fourth Avenue,
Yep.
pre-COVID for sure, like 4 or 5 years ago. So
Yeah.
excited to catch up
Yeah.
officially on the internet.
Yeah, no, and just for people who aren't familiar, um, Matt and Fairing were sort of the first on the map that I knew of who were doing effectively post-purchase surveys. So this is an example of like first-party data. I'm sure most of you who are listening have maybe you're a customer of Fairing, maybe use a similar product, but I was telling Matt it'd be great for him to quickly just talk through just like what's happened in the landscape around just access to data and like specifically qualitative data from customers and how specifically like some interesting topics around like what is it, how are people using it effectively, and if yeah, we can go off there, nerd around a bit, and yeah, excited to get into this. All right, Matt, so take it away.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, at Fairing, we bring speed and scale to survey data is how we position ourselves. Today, where we capture that data is like 99% on order confirmation pages. So we fit into that kind of post-purchase survey category. Of course, what we're building beyond that is way greater. But today, yeah, that's where the majority of capture happens. And the reason why we built this, honestly, as a side project back in 2018, was really to solve attribution, or at least help provide another data point into the attribution equation. Um, like when we initially did this, it was with a Google form. It was for a consulting client of ours, and the data wasn't connected to the order data, and that's where the light bulb went off in our head around, oh, we could just like build a simple form and connect this. But that was kind of square one. I think the zeitgeist hadn't caught up to, or wasn't at the kind of zero party, first party data world yet. So I don't want to say patiently, but waited 2 or so years before things started to align with where we thought it was going. But yeah, as far as the data goes, like we were founded on attribution. We power about 500,000 how did you hear about us questions a day at this point. And the really insightful thing that we're seeing and where we're pushing the product towards is attribution is still that wedge. It's what literally 100% of our new customers come in, and that's the first question they ask. And what we're really excited is we're seeing customers like add more questions into their question stream, which is like this kind of stream of questions that our product can serve to end consumers. And that's where things get really interesting for our customers, because at first they just had this attribution data. So they're asking questions like, how did you hear about us, for example? And let's say TikTok, it's obviously a very growing channel right now. There was no way for them to understand that specific channel audience. So you have your channel distribution, which like if we were to look at a typical client, we're looking at like Facebook, Instagram, Google, TikTok, word of mouth, podcast, and kind of TV as you scale up. It was very difficult to understand who the customer was from each channel. So as
Mm-hmm.
we were chatting before we kind of hit record on this, Facebook Audience Insights used to be like the way, like you upload a list of emails and then you understand demographic data and could understand who these specific cohorts of customers were. And until a lot of these brands kind of graduate and start kind of enriching their data sets with third-party data, which again is getting more and more difficult to pull in, it's very hard for a brand to know like who is my TikTok customer. On the
Mm-hmm.
retention side, it's like, okay, I have a TikTok customer. They are a very low churn subscription customer. Like, who is that customer? What's their age? What's their gender? Why did they buy? Like, how would they classify themselves from a persona perspective? And that's where our product has morphed into with this question stream, is allowing merchants to like, let's say help solve attribution, but also understand channels and like more deeply their customers on such another level than they have been before. And I think the thing that's happening is like it's no longer a kind of money in, money out scenario where you just put money into most like literally the Facebook platform for so long and you get money out.
Mm-hmm.
Brands are looking for competitive advantages. Like it's very difficult to operate and scale without doing something proprietary at this point for a lot of these brands, and that's where like we come in. We like literally give them a data set their competitors have zero access to. So that's a little bit of backstory about our lineage and kind of where we're moving towards and what we're excited about in the future.
And so I'm curious. So when you're talking about the data, all the data that they're getting, you guys don't provide any sort of supplemental data, right? Or is that the direction you're going? Because you were talking about like, so if you're like so there'd be sort of two groups of customers. We call it low volume merchants, yep. And then you have high volume merchants. My assumption is if you're a low volume merchant, yes, you're getting data on a lot of your customers, but you have nothing to really compare it to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't do too much aggregate reporting. We're going to be doing that in the near term, actually, to kind of give some more context into kind of this massive data that we have today. To be frank and transparent, we didn't want to do any aggregate reporting very early because we were weary of like exposing any secrets that a brand might have, right. Where it's like, right. We knew there was about a dozen merchants on our platform who saw TikTok before anyone else. And we didn't want to start talking about TikTok until it was at mass because, okay, like why is now all my competitors on TikTok? Oh, like Fairing just wrote a blog post right. about 10 CPG like coffee companies that use TikTok or something. Right. So we've been pretty weary of that. But we're going to start doing like really interesting vertical guides and whatnot, just to give people context, help them like ask better questions and understand attribution better.
Yeah. And I'm curious, like what percentage of people actually fill out these post-purchase surveys?
Yeah, so it's a little over 50% platform wide on ours. So it's like a ton of data. Like I think most people, when they think of surveying, especially via email, they're expecting like I think on the bright side, maybe like 10%, maybe a little less. If they're providing an incentive, maybe 15, 20. And then you start getting into some biases around surveys. If you have an incentive bias where people are just completing it for the incentive. So we are like 5x essentially any expectation, and that's definitely been a big factor in our growth, and it's also a reason why we're not like jumping to go do email, SMS, and like landing page surveys, is because our completion rate is so high right now. Like that's a core value prop of what we offer, and once we start to kind of dilute that and build more categorical features in that side, it will drop so dramatically, and it won't allow us to like innovate as much as we want on our question stream and how we decide and how we ask questions essentially.
Yeah, I mean, have you found, going back to, I'll try to keep it from being too basic. Like, what I'm interested in digging into is like, what are the smartest brands doing? Like, what are the questions that, beyond the obvious one of like, how did you hear about us? Like, what are some like unique or innovative ways you see people using both like the types of questions they're asking, and then how are they using that, even in ways that have been surprising for you?
Yeah. So there's a few categories. So we group them into 4 categories. So we have attribution questions, and really the core 2 are how did you hear about us and when did you hear about us? Like the when helps you understand that window. Like if you have a very long purchase consideration window, like you should move away from any kind of direct response reporting because it's not going to be very accurate. If you have a very short, then like you can almost look at GA and help yourself scale. So attribution is the first one. Personalization and segmentation is the second. So these are questions that like think about if you're building any kind of flow in Klaviyo or any other ESP. These are questions that you could filter on. So it's like a question like, how would you classify yourself? Oh, you're a hobbyist or a professional. It's like, okay, this is a hobbyist flow. Let's talk to this persona very personally as if they're a hobbyist. They're not someone who's using this product as a professional. So that's the second category that we really harp on. The third is CRO, which is a little bit like out of left field. Because it's less of connecting the data to the customer, but it's more of like, how is your shopping experience? Like, given the point of where we live, a really good feedback loop is to turn that question on for a week, sort through all those open-ended responses. It's people that are like, I couldn't find your return policy, or like the most common one, frankly, is like, I got emailed a code and it didn't work. So just ways to improve the customer experience. You can also ask like, why did you buy? And a customer could say X, Y, Z. Okay, now you go use that copy in your creative, like creating a really good feedback loop to help increase conversions. And then the fourth is just this category of general customer research. And this is questions like maybe age, gender, that you're not going to like filter necessarily in a Klaviyo or use for personalization, but it's really informative. And some examples for kind of all of those, the hobbyist, the personalization one I really like. My favorite question, you might be able to word it differently for each brand, is just how would you classify yourself? It's like the easiest thing to then create personas that honestly are quite difficult to build if you want to really action on them. So anything that would help you there. We work with this like hardware company that literally has that example. They have hobbyists, educators, and professionals. And previous to asking that question, he thought that like 80% of his customers were professionals. After asking that, literally within like 2 days, he goes, yep, completely wrong. It's like 20% professionals. I have this whole cohort of hobbyists who are buying our product. And then they can hey, let's maybe look at Reddit. Let's look at some other channels where these hobbyists hang out. On the customer research side, this is the one that we like to kind of join with that attribution data. So questions like, what brand are you switching from? On the CPG side, I know a toothpaste company we work with, they were using that in all their investor decks because they were like saying like, look at this, like we are literally taking market share from Crest and like all these core toothpaste companies, which I guess was very informative in them kind of raising the next round of capital. And then also like you start to join that data with your survey data and you're like, oh, it's interesting. We're taking a lot of people from this channel who are this demographic and are switching from this brand. Like, what can that tell us? Like, maybe we can do like a viral TikTok campaign that like mentions this brand and how so many people are switching from it, kind of thing. So there's some really good feedback loops to help optimize creative, optimize ad copy, and just improve like conversion and CTR across all of your channels.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, the first time it really hit me how, I'll say, for lack of a better term, powerful and useful your product was I was speaking with the head of growth of one of our of a mutual customer of ours, and they were talking about they were getting pushed actually by their investors around specific competitors in their space, and they were able to point to their, we'll call it fairing data. It was Enquire at the time.
Enquire data,
yeah. Their fairing data and be like, no, this is actually who our competitor is, because this is basically this is what every single customer or the people who are replying, this is what they say that they're switching from, or this is what they're using as a substitute. It's not this other competitor, or we'll call it alternative solution, that you're saying is like a threat to us. In fact, that has never even come up in these post-purchase surveys. This completely other company that is not even like a D2C brand is the one that comes up over and over again. And he was just remarking to me, and I don't think he even knew that you and I like were friends and knew each other. He was just telling me this story, and I was just like, shit. This is a really powerful anecdote.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, and like, so what you just said just reminded me of that, where that was like the first time that I kind of put this together, and it's such a simple idea though, which it's
and surveys
yeah.
To that point, surveying's obviously been around forever. On the political side, like polling is obviously a huge business, and I think with a lot of CPG like D2C brands, like surveying in its historical sense, which is very much research based, like definitely was not like a popular thing to do, or a thing that was definitely preached on doing. And if you were going to do it, let's say you were going to do it quarterly and send out a Typeform or SurveyMonkey survey, like crafting that survey was always a like challenge. Essentially, it was like, how do I write all these questions? Are these the right 10 questions or 20 questions, kind of thing?
Right.
Where with our product, since we've decoupled questions, like that's the whole concept of question stream. Let's serve them over time. They don't all have to be captured at once. It reduces a lot of that like not necessarily fear, but like friction of like getting started and asking questions to your consumers. Where historically, like you literally had to spend maybe a week crafting questions. Like if you were at a certain scale, you were probably working with an agency to make sure you weren't like writing them in a very biased way or whatnot. It was like this big project. I know a company that spent like 100 grand on a quarterly survey with like one of the big four consulting firms.
Mm-hmm.
And where we come in is like removing a lot of that like hesitation around like I don't have to build a question, literally just add a question. Like you want to go
Mm-hmm.
ask about where people are switching from, like just go add it right now and like you'll get data within the next half hour as long as you're doing like some volume. So it's definitely like especially for that brand in particular, it like started with how did you hear about us? And I was like, oh, let's just ask these other questions. And pretty quickly they realized that they were solving a ton of problems.
And I'm curious when you were saying that, basically, because I do know, like in customer development, and oftentimes when you're doing surveys, yeah, you basically are like, I mean, it's the same with like pre-qualification surveys. Like with Rodeo, we have I think like 5 questions that we ask up front, and these are intended to be questions that we couldn't just figure out the answer ourselves if we like were to visit the website. Like, basically, you want to ask questions that you wouldn't otherwise be able to easily answer,
Yeah.
but that actually matter. And then the longer the form, the less likely someone is to complete it. So when you were talking about being able to create streams, you made it sound and not having to ask all the questions at once. Is that like what did you mean by that? Because my assumption is like right now you guys are just on the order confirmation page because that's where you're focusing. And so,
Yep.
what did you mean by when you're saying, well, you don't have to ask all the questions right now? You mean that you can change the questions up over time, or is it like what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so today again, it'll be multi like surface as we call them. Um,
Mm,
but what I mean by that is like let's say we want to ask you like 10 questions, for example. Um,
mm-hmm.
if you were to answer 3 of them on your first order, those 10
Yeah.
questions, it's not like a monolith where we're like it's loaded on the page and you answer all of them. If you were to answer 3 of those and then let's say you got distracted, someone texted you, you didn't answer questions 4 through 6, the next time you place an order, it's going to pick up right where you left off.
Ah, got it.
And the rules could have
Okay,
changed in that period of time. Like maybe the
got it.
marketer was like, let's actually ask this question before this one. Um, so essentially, like the way it works with our servers, like every time you load a page, we tell you which question to ask. So this is where
Got
we're
it.
gonna like we're spending a ton of time here. We'll be like getting more intelligent with when we're asking questions. Like, hey, we know Ben never answers this question, so like, how about we don't show it to him because we know it may piss him off that he like don't ask me that question. But that's what I mean by like decoupled, where each question essentially has its own
Interesting.
rules
Yeah,
and can be served over time. And like you and I might get different questions based on our purchase behavior.
got it. No, that was interesting because that I didn't realize. I didn't realize that it's even more just about like as someone's buying frequently or over the course of their life, you're serving them additional questions that they haven't answered.
Exactly. And that it's funny you mentioned B2B because in the B2B sense, I don't know if you're familiar with the term progressive profiling, but that's that whole idea of like, okay, it's mostly in like enterprise sales, but it's like, okay, we're trying to learn about this customer. We obviously can't ask
Mm-hmm.
him these 30 things that are
Every
allow
right.
us to like, let's like, okay, the first call, let's like ask him these and we'll send him this
Yep.
thing to fill out. And it's like
Yep.
it's under like building that profile over time. And that's where we
Yep.
want to get really good at where it's like, it's going to be impossible for you to build 100% of that profile in that first order. But if a customer
Yep.
is a customer over their life cycle, a few years, we can like get smart about building that profile in like a really good experience. So like not overloading the customer with like 15 questions on their first order kind of thing. And then get targeted with, hey, we don't need to ask him this question or her this question because we know it's not going to be overly helpful.
Got it. Interesting. And so, I mean, what are some of the? So I know you guys you integrate. You were saying like Klaviyo is one example. So obviously, you guys integrate with a number of different. We'll call it. Uh, I mean, presumably you also could integrate with like a data warehouse. So I'm just trying to think of all the
Yeah.
different places where this becomes supplemental data, where it can be combined with other information about the customer, right? So if you're um, yeah, can you give us like some sort of like what are the highlights of places and that where it's been most useful for people to use this data?
Yeah. So there's like right now there's call it 3 or 4 key categories. So like that first one
Mm-hmm.
is like your CRM, like
Yep.
Klaviyo. CDP, CRM, whatever they
Yeah,
are
yeah,
positioning themselves as today. They're like definitely by far our most popular integration.
yeah.
Like we work pretty closely with them. But you think about anyone who's communicating to a customer in that regard. So like PostScript, Attentive, kind of all of they all fit into this kind of I'd argue very similar bucket in kind of outward messaging and marketing to customers. So that's kind of the first category is like anything CRM related. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the second one is still attribution based. So it's less of like profile building and it's more of helping to fill gaps that click based attribution can't fill. So if
Mm-hmm.
like you tell me about something like a product today and I literally go directly to the URL and purchase it right now, there's zero way that like any of these existing attribution tools, like honestly, thank God, because Facebook was essentially doing that to some extent, would be able to track that. So we work
Mm-hmm.
with a ton of like Rockerbox. I think Northbeam has an integration with us at this point, like helping
Got it.
solve those missing gaps from the attribution side of things. And then that third one is like it is profile building, but we work with now with like Dacity, Peel,
Mm-hmm.
Ceres Analytics just built an integration. Triple Whale has an
Mm-hmm.
integration with us, and that's where we're like really helping build customer profiles. And we made the decision a while ago. It's like okay, we could build out a lot of this ourselves, kind of thing. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
we could build an analytics tool essentially,
Right.
um, but like if a customer's already using Audacity or a Triple Whale, like why do
Right.
they need to log into us? Like log into us and we'll give you really intelligent information around question asking. But if you
Yeah.
want to go look at this data, like look at it where you're already spending most of your time from an analytics side of things. Um, so those are the core ones. We're definitely like improving our application, allowing you kind of like from a profile perspective, like understanding who your customers are. That's one of the things we are working on. But those are kind of the three places right now that this data gets pushed to.
Got it. And I'm trying to think of the last time, because I actually can't recall the last time I got a post-purchase survey. Um, have you guys experimented at all with? Because if it's on the order confirmation page, I'm curious: is there at all like customer blindness around like not noticing it? Because you see effectively your order confirmation, you see probably Google Map showing, oh, this is your house.
Ton of
Like, do you guys
things.
do anything around? Yeah,
Yeah, we don't
getting
like
it.
customers that have high completion rates like prioritize us. So we're like front and center on the page.
Got
So
it.
if they don't have like if we're not front and center, let's say they have a refer a friend pop up, which is a very common one,
Right.
like our response rate drops to about 30, 35. It's very
Mm-hmm.
rarely below 30, no matter what's going on
I'll
the
say it's
page,
still
unless
that's
it's
still not bad.
no, not bad at all. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, we work with about 2,500 brands, and I think you might just be avoiding all of them. So we can use a
That or I'm
I
blind. That
purchased
or I'm just blind. Yeah.
yeah, I purchased a lamp like a Loom Cube today
Uh huh.
for now my new home office that I'm building out,
Uh huh.
and yeah, I got a fairing question, and I was like, oh, I
That's
did not know
awesome.
they were a customer. So that is always a very big delight for myself and anyone on the team to see us out in the wild.
No, I was gonna say that's like the next level, right? Like beyond the fact of people only knowing you by your new name, the other as an entrepreneur, the other exciting experience is coming across a brand that you didn't realize was a customer.
Yeah,
Um, that's funny. A very short anecdote, but I'll say back at
yeah,
CarHook, we had this experience where someone signed up, and it was like for the Macklemore merch store. And long story short, like we got on the phone call to talk to them, and like we were talking to like the representative from like the merch store. It turned out to be Macklemore's wife, and so and she had like invited me to one of their shows and stuff like that. And it was just like one of those absurd experiences where you're like, it's not only you don't realize who your customer is sometimes, but then sometimes when you do connect, then you realize it's actually a
oh,
representative
oh
at that
yeah,
company where you're like
yeah,
literally talking to Macklemore's wife.
yeah.
Um, so that was one of the first experiences where I was just like, I didn't even realize that the store had signed up. We were just like helping them with onboarding. Then we're just like, oh, it's cool. It's a merch store for Macklemore. And then you go like this level deeper when you're doing customer customer development and customer service.
Yeah.
We're like, oh my goodness. So I was just
This
gonna say,
is, yeah.
keep an eye out for other experiences like that where you're
Oh,
like,
totally.
yeah.
We work
Um,
with a couple of YouTubers who have Shopify stores, and those are pretty cool. Like, because you're like, I've like seen on YouTube the product, and you're like, oh, that's a customer of ours. And they all get very high completion rates because their audience is like so excited to engage with them in any way possible.
mhm. Um, so are there any sort of tips and tricks that you'd recommend, and even ways for brands who are, well, obviously, first off, if a brand's currently not acquiring or collecting first party or zero party data,
Yeah.
they should be. Um, and I'll say it for you. You should sign up for Fairing. Um, secondly, though, what beyond just sort of like the obvious questions and things, like what would you recommend in terms of like, how can someone really make the best use of this data, and like what are some of like the most effective ways to do it? Is it incorporating it into the messaging and Klaviyo, like you were saying, of like segmenting by hobbyist versus professional, or like, because I think that the worst thing would be for you just to collect this data and not actually do anything with it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, that's we think of ourselves analogous to like Segment in that regard, where if you like wire up
Mm-hmm.
Segment and you're capturing all this data and you don't actually do anything with it, like why are you capturing it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it really depends on like your business problem. I think if you're not using a post-purchase survey for attribution, like that's just square one right now, especially with
Mm-hmm.
all that's going on with tracking. Um, it's like if you've never used one, it's like I don't want to say addicting, but our retention curve looks very good because once someone adds it and they've never had this data before, it's so exciting
Yeah.
to see like, oh, word of mouth, like this person wrote in, this influencer mentioned us, and like we would have never known. Like if we look at the
Right.
UTM parameters, it's like literally direct none. Like there's nothing attached to it. So definitely on the attribution side for sure. Like I think that's table stakes at this point. Um, and then like it really depends what your like business objectives are. I think on the retention side of things, given the topic at hand, like I would start to like think about, you want to obviously build personas of like who's subscribing and who's not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what do those customers look like? What are they, like? Where are they coming from? And trying to answer for your brand, like anything that would help you bifurcate the two of those, so you can
Yeah.
market to them differently. Get more of those single subscribers over to a repeat behavior, or maybe like they don't want to kind of
Yep.
thing. So that's how I would approach it. Like there's not like questions like why didn't you subscribe, or have you ever subscribed to a similar product before? It could definitely be very informative on the subscription side,
Yeah.
um, to help you understand because you might, it could just be personal preference. It could be literally nothing else other than
Yeah.
personal preference.
Well, that's actually, it's interesting you brought that up, and it's good because apparently this is subscription radio, and we haven't talked about subscriptions. Um, but I was going to say, like, one of the big, I'd say, like, themes in conversations that I have with brands, and this is it from the consumer perspective, is I'm like, a subscription's one way of driving repeat purchases. It's not
Yeah,
the end all be all. It is a business model. Consumers generally don't think in terms of subscription. The job to be done, so to speak, is I want the product when I need it. I don't want to run out. I also don't want too much of this shit, right? Like
yeah,
pile up is like the number one reason people cancel, and it's like I think the latest stats like 40% of all subscribers cancel within the first year. And so like the big like thing that I've been trying to talk to brands about is like it's a lot of your customers cancel not because they don't like your product, but you're force feeding them.
yeah,
And there's a lot of customers who buy repeatedly who doesn't matter what your subscription offer is. They just don't want to be locked into a subscription for whatever reason. Oftentimes
yeah,
it's like anxiety around like I'm basically giving you my credit card and giving you permission to charge me unless I catch you before you charge me, which is why like design and looking at it from the consumer point of view and like messaging and stuff is so important. Where like there is this like in between mode where it's like for customer, if you can understand, I'm imagining like and again, I don't know of any brands that have reached out to their customers or their repeat customers. Like that's one thing that we've been doing is like segmenting people into like repeat customers. Like these folks buy on clockwork, but they're not subscription. Why is that? Right? Like my guess is that if you were to have, my guess is if you were to reach out to them and be able to talk to them or send them a survey or do some sort of qualitative research, it is either that they feel like a subscription would be too prescriptive, maybe they're worried about budget. there's a lot of different reasons, and with that you can design a solution. But the truth is, not everyone wants to subscribe to stuff. And I'm just imagining, like, again, going back to like anecdotal experiences, like the last 3 days I've been generating reports for several of our customers, building up effectively like the lifetime history of all the customers, and like how many subscriptions do they have, how many are active, how many like were paused, canceled, etc. Discount code, was there a discount you used on the very first order so you can do attribution back to the original one? But I was saying we really should be able to, I was saying the one thing that we don't have is something like fairing to merge that also, because that would be very powerful to incorporate into these reports that we're generating for customers. And I don't actually know if there's a way for us to grab that from within Shopify itself. Like, if someone has Enquire installed, or would we would need to do an integration with you?
Yeah, we have an API where you can pull it from, and also like we have a Shopify Flow integration, which like now works for 95% of our customers, where they could like tag an order with a response.
Got it.
But the more resilient way would obviously be using our API.
Yeah. All right. Funny. I'm glad this came up in this conversation, because now I'm like, on my list of things to do.
That'd be awesome.
You guys. No, because that makes complete sense, and I think, but going back to subscriptions, I think can you talk a little bit about your own experience as a consumer, and even like, do you have any consumer subscriptions yourself?
Yeah, I have 3 subscriptions. Just 3 right now that I've like stuck with for, I think it's over like 2 years at this point.
One of them I bought because of you.
Which one?
It was the mammal, the shampoo.
Oh yeah. Yep. They're great. I had to pause that because I had too much. That's a good example.
Yeah, I do too. I have like
I'm not
3 of them
subscribing anymore.
I canceled it too.
That wasn't even when I was the 3 that, and it's. I feel like I've formulated somewhat of an opinion while you were just talking there, but like the modern mammals would fit into this. But the 3 that I have not turned off is a Quip toothbrush head that comes quarterly.
Same. I have that too.
Verve coffee. So I started on Trade. Trade introduced me to Verve. Like, and my wife and I like are obsessed with this one thing, and we've literally never turned it off. And then the third is Real, like REL toilet paper, which is like this bamboo toilet paper that's like super soft, and we obviously continue to need it, and we never like. And as I'm thinking, like those, like let's say going to the bathroom, not to kind of go in that direction, but going to the bathroom, brushing your teeth, and drinking coffee are 3 things I do so consistently, like every day, that like there's been no reason to change the subscriptions. Like I had to push the Verve out a week because we moved a couple weeks ago, and like it bundled up. Like I think that's the first time I've ever had to do it. So it's interesting from a subscription standpoint. Like when you think about like food subscriptions, where it's like the way I'm like consuming a certain like food product could wild greatly on like literally my mood, how healthy I want to be that week, kind of thing, which throws a ton of like stochastic nature in there, is like just like that might make no sense into why I'm buying, and there could be this kind of third party externality that's interrupting my subscription with a brand. Long-winded answer is like those are the 3 that I've been subscribed to for a while and haven't canceled. Even as like I was like excited to update the address to this new address kind of thing. I was like, oh, we're going to start getting it over here kind of thing. So
that's interesting. How do you track your different subscriptions? I guess you only have 3 though, so you keep it top of mind.
Yeah, if I see something on like my Amex that shouldn't be there too long, that's usually how I'm tracking it. And I'm like, oh, I'm paying for that kind of thing. But I guess it's usually on the digital side of things. Yeah.
Well, I guess because I just moved like a week and a half ago, so I still am unpacking, and I had a similar thing where I was like, I generally am pretty anal about keeping track of all my subscriptions, but I was like, I did mail forwarding, but I still was like, what do I need to change the address of to go to my new place? And so you can, like, I've used something like Truebill, which typically will help you identify subscriptions and stuff like that. But I think that this fact of that you have to independently manage a dozen different subscriptions in the world of problems is pretty, if not extremely first worldish, and like, oh, but it is a pain, right? Like,
Yeah,
and to Amazon's credit, as much as I think their subscription experience actually is not that
it's
great. I don't know
pretty
if you've ever
horrible.
used
Yeah, but I do.
subscribe and
I
save.
subscribe. I
Yeah.
subscribe to Liquid Death Lime, like sparkling their lime flavor for the last like 8 or whenever it came out, 4 months ago, 6 months ago.
Yeah.
That's another subscription, and that stuff is
Yeah.
yeah. I will. They're a customer of ours as well, and I'll happily shout Liquid Death because that sparkling like LaCroix alternative is very delicious.
I'll have to try that because I love the lime Lacroix, LaCroix, LaCroix.
Yeah, that's right here, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, no, but that is interesting. Like, because I would imagine like for the three products that you talked about, which are really like toiletries and then coffee, which leads to toiletries. But that's the type of thing I would expect Amazon to be the perfect sort of way to do it because like you're buying it with all the other household stuff, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if going directly to the brand, have you even looked if any of these brands are available on Amazon? If
I haven't.
not, it
I'm
was
assuming Quip is at
yeah,
this point. I know they're in Target. I just saw them in Target last week.
interesting. Yeah.
So I would assume they are. But something for like a Quip, I like something makes me. It could be a reinforcing mechanism where like they know that I'm continuously like brushing my teeth. That makes me excited to be a
Hmm.
subscriber versus like Amazon knows I'm brushing my teeth. Um, and yeah, there's no like the experience is fine on the Quip side, so I haven't had the need to switch.
Yeah. No, it's just interesting. It's just something that came to mind because I was like, for certain products, it you kind of just want to. It makes sense that you would just centralize them because you'd be buying
Yeah,
them together. But I do the same thing, and oftentimes it's because the product's not available on Amazon, or there's some sort of membership perk.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um,
I feel like I go to Amazon for like price and speed,
yep.
and at least for the things I subscribe to today, like speed isn't important on a subscription. Like it's just going to come when it comes, and price for these particular products, like they're direct to consumer brands, we're not going to. I'm not looking to compete on price there.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Well, anything else that you think's worth talking about with the rest of our time around related to post-purchase surveys or just zero-party data, and just like what are some of the strategies and tactics that you see? I know you don't want to give away what channel's blowing up because you don't.
There is a couple.
um,
There's two right now that are. Yeah, it's really dependent on the brand as far as tactics go. I think the biggest
yeah.
recommendation we have is like if you use fairing, like ask more than one question.
Hmm.
So we launched a single question. So like there's still a portion of our customers who are just on autopilot with that, and we're actively like pushing them to ask more and learn more. So that's probably my biggest piece of advice is like don't be afraid to ask like 3, 4 questions. The data shows that like once a customer gets to the third question, there's like a almost 100% chance they'll get to the end of the stream if you have literally 10, 12
Hmm.
questions. So that's my biggest piece of advice uh, is to ask like don't be afraid to ask questions and like think about building a competitive advantage. Like how do you do that
Hmm.
today? And if you're looking at the same exact dashboards as all of your customers or all of your competitors rather, you're not necessarily
Hmm.
building a competitive advantage in that realm where if you're using data provided from your customers, like that's something your competitors can't get.
Yeah.
So capture it and use it, and that's a really good way to start building a foundation for like a like concrete competitive advantage against competitors.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time and your brain power on this, man. Um,
Totally.
one question I
There
like to
is.
ask is, oh, sorry, go
I
ahead.
want. I wanted to chat about one thing, and feel
Yeah,
free to
yeah, go
edit
for
this
it.
out. But on the
Yeah.
subscription side of things, the thing I'm still patiently waiting for, and this was in the kind of ecom zeitgeist in like I think maybe 2015 or maybe a couple of years after that is the idea of kind of conversational commerce, which is like way
Hmm.
overblown now. And I'm not saying like that's the solution, but the one thing I'm very excited for if this ever happens is Apple and iMessage really leaning into that like business to consumer chat
Yeah.
experience and allowing purchases to happen there. And that's where
Yeah.
like whenever I talk to, it's literally Home Depot and Delta. Like now that I moved into a
Yeah.
house, they're the two that I've experienced. Like literally, you could chat with Delta, and like it's
Yeah.
an incredible experience. Like changing a flight, doing all those things, and it's all through iMessage. You're not like, am I going to
Yeah.
close this window in my Safari on my phone? So that's especially for reordering. Like if the experience is baked into the existing messaging, like I think we're all at the point where if you're using an iPhone, you're happy to see a blue message versus a green message.
Yeah.
And if that experience continues to improve, like I could see a lot of, especially repeat behavior moving to
Yeah.
messaging versus right now it's, I know PostScript and Klaviyo and all these guys are working on it with Shopify, but right now it's very much like time to reorder. Here's a link.
Yeah.
And once that removes the whole link and allows you to do that's probably the most exciting, the thing I'm most excited about in the kind of subscription world. And like like as a consumer, I'm like, I hope this comes out.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't even remember if you might have even commented on it, but I had posted a fair amount of research because I nerded out for a while on RCS,
Yep.
where I think this is pre-COVID, but so what you're referring to that Home Depot does is called like Apple Business Messaging, and
Exactly.
they offer it. I think even CB2 is another customer of theirs, where basically it's rich messaging where a business can correspond, and basically you can do actions within the thread of like the iMessage.
Yep.
The universal protocol is RCS, which Apple has
Avoided.
said avoid. Well, yeah, they've said like we're not going to adopt this because, as with Apple, with everything, for I'm sure some maybe good reasons, maybe not. They don't want. They want their own protocol.
Yeah. Did you see
But
the news
regardless, which
like
one?
2 weeks ago with Google suing Apple?
No.
Yeah. So they are Alphabet. I have to pull up the article, and I hope I'm not misquoting this, but they're currently suing Apple because Apple will not adopt RCS
Oh,
and
really?
is staying.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
know
and
that.
they're saying that Apple is creating a bad experience for essentially Android, like a non iMessage user
Yeah.
within the app, like, and it's create like there's some antitrust thing or something going on there. But that was like 2 weeks ago, and that was like my first. I was like, ooh, like something like
Interesting.
Apple or Google clearly understands like what's going on in this arena when like Apple's trying to create this very tight ecosystem around messaging.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because it took. I mean, as you look at any protocol, right? Whether it's TCP, email, whatever. Like all of these things are really slow to adopt, and it took a really long time for the carriers to even agree around RCS, and it's gone through so many permutations.
Yeah.
The and obviously Apple's position on it, from what I understood, was they can innovate faster by just not having to deal with protocols, right? So that's the argument. It's basically the public versus private thing, where you'll move an open source project versus a private project. But I mean, I agree. Like as a consumer, like I just want this to be universal.
Yeah.
And it's funny though, because I actually have a very different experience with like the reply to buy stuff around subscriptions. So ironically, prior to Rodeo, we were still working on One Click Pony, which was like this just in time subscription where it was just like driving repeat purchases with
Yeah.
a one click buy button that can be embedded in email and SMS. We built out the entire chatbot thing where you could we would text you, and this is before PostScript. Ironically, where like we would text you and we would say, hey, are you ready for more? You could reply one with yes and like quantity. Like what drove me crazy about it and still drives me crazy as a consumer is it's not as bad as basically the automated like basically when I call up for customer support, like press
Yeah.
1 if you want to do this, press 2 if you want to do this. Like there is something somewhat annoying about it as a consumer. And so like at least where I'll be like where I might change my opinion on this, but kind of where I shook out was I actually like a link as long as it brings me into a very fast loading web app
Yeah,
where the actual experience can be designed, because unless you're just trying to do very basic things, and thinking of it from the brand perspective too, if it's as simple as a brand texting you and like it's like press 1 to cancel, then they just cancel, right?
yeah,
Versus being able to provide a rich experience. And you can argue that, well, maybe for consumers it's actually better to be able to just reply 1 and cancel. But then what's happening is you're losing like the design. The brand is not in control of the experience, the consumer experience as much.
totally. Yeah, yeah,
And again, I'm still sort of, I'm keeping an open mind about this, but where I've sort of fallen is that like we'd prefer to focus on like the subscription portal and making that as flexible and consumer centric as possible and like easy to use, and just sending it and like sending a link where you're automatically logged into it using
yeah.
passwordless authentication. Is that some brands just want to be able to text with their customers, and I get that. My argument typically is, or you can just click one button and it literally just loads really quickly because it's a headless portal.
Yeah.
And then it feels like a web app. I don't know. You're making me think about this, which is the point of these conversations.
Yeah, no, and I think there's definitely a place for that. I think the interesting thing is, like, let's say you want to go reorder, like you're not subscribed,
Yeah.
and then that's where it's like, okay, you go to the site, like hopefully you remember your username and password, and then it all breaks down from there. I think Shopify is actually coming out with passwordless like magic links soon, which I'm like very excited for. I think it's going to increase logins on Shopify because I feel like a lot of people have bugs in their login flows, to be frank.
Yeah.
And that's going to definitely improve some things. But like anything that allows you, like you guys sending a link that kind of is already logged in, anything that removes any and all friction from me as a consumer having to like think of anything except what I'm trying to do at hand. Like I don't want to have to think about logging in. To me is going to be advantageous. I think that, the question is, and I wonder where brands are going with this from an SMS perspective. Is like, I feel like does every brand have their own phone number at this point? Like I know a lot of them were sharing, just looking at it, where it's like, can I like dedicated, like look at this contact on my phone? Yeah. Can I look up this contact in my phone?
Multiple brands on the same phone. And what was crazy was they would like, I could reply stop, and it would unsubscribe me from all the brands. And it was like one specific brand or one specific SMS company that was doing it. I knew which one it was because I was testing them all out. I was looking at like attention, and I was like, I realized that all these brands were sharing the same phone number, and when I wrote stop, it unsubscribed me from all of them.
From all of them.
But that does go to the other piece, which is like, if you're using Klaviyo, you're probably using that for your marketing, maybe some transactional SMS, but maybe you're also using Attentive for other stuff. Shopify sending you text messages to like log into your account or giving you shipment updates. I don't know to what extent how important it is for there to be a single phone number for a brand. Like is someone going to notice or know that or care that a brand's texting them from like 3 different phone numbers? Probably not. Like I don't really pay attention.
The question to me is like, can a brand be a contact in a phone? Where then that's the avenue in which you would access the brand. Like that's the way in which you would, instead of going to the URL and worrying about your login, if you could go to your contacts or open up iMessage and type in the brand, and that takes you to like your logged in experience natively through your phone without having to download another app. That's where, to me, like on the Delta example, like if I want to message Delta's customer service, like I don't log, like I literally open iMessage, type Delta, and they already know who I am because they have my phone number and it's secure. So you'll have to, but it's really like the avenues that interest me.
I mean, because you can already theoretically do that, right? And people do that with you can create you can actually even push like even through SMS like contact.
Create a contact,
basically create a contact. You can include an image, so you can theoretically text the brand. I think, but there is this weird thing around push and pull, which is like my big thing is as a consumer, I want one less thing to think about. So in your case, you have a prompt where you have a Delta flight or you want to get in touch with Delta. but you're not going to like with the with the bamboo toilet paper or the drink. Oftentimes, what you want is for them to anticipate your need, because by the time you're thinking of them, you probably have run out.
Yeah. That's not a good place to be.
I'm sure there's situations where you're like, I just want to text the bamboo I almost said underwear. That's another. There's another product idea.
Yeah.
Text the bamboo toilet paper. But my guess in general is like, as a consumer, the value of repeat purchasing and or something that's subscription like is I don't want to think. I want you to remind me. Like whenever my wife asks me to remind her of something, I talk to Siri and I say, Siri, remind me. And I just look at my wife and I'm like, I wish you would just do that. but no, like that's the thing. It's like I don't want to think. I don't want the cognitive load of thinking about these things. And so I think it's as much about anticipation and yes, making it easy for you to go into your contact list and like reach out specifically to a brand. But I think, if you were to think about every single brand that you interact with, by and large, I wish they just were like, hey, it's been 30 days. You've bought this product twice. It's been 30 days since you last purchased. Do you need more? Or it's been 20 days and you typically buy it every 30 days. Do you need more? Right.
Yeah.
And so that to me, from a consumer perspective, is like, that's convenient. So I don't know. I think that there's an enormous amount of space and opportunity, and I think one of the challenges is there is a fracturing of if people are across if every brand is using different subscription platforms. As a consumer, I just want to manage all my subscriptions in one place. Right. And we've thought a lot about that, and just like, they're in the same. But again, these are secondary problems to all the other problems. But I think at the end of the day, it's like, how do we find that middle ground between how to help brands build sustainable, faster growing businesses, more successful businesses, where in their case they want predictable revenue, and they want more information. They want as much information about their customer as possible. Whereas you, on the flip side, have customers who want control over their data, whether it's GDPR or I don't remember what it is in the EU. But
GDPR is the EU.
Yeah, GDPR, and then there's California has their own thing, and
CCPA. There's a ton of them.
I knew there were a few different acronyms. But like, there's this like weird, interesting tension between how do you get enough information and the right information so that you can actually build a better experience without it feeling like you're just where it's exploitative, right? Like in my mind, subscriptions like are great up until the point in which they're convenient, but like a subscription isn't the solution per se. It's just one way of approaching it for a certain segment of customers. But if a brand wants recurring revenue, like there are other ways. There's a spectrum of ways to do repeat purchases without just it being a subscription or people having to remember on their own. Because like as I said, like I just want to be reminded.
No, totally.
But I want you to have my cart on file. Like I don't want to have to do the work of like adding the product to the cart and then having to check out and all this other.
That's the whole thing.
Right. Cool, man. Well, I know we went over a bit, but I'm glad you brought up that, and we went down this tangent.
I love talking about that because I feel like I don't talk about it with too many people. Like this is a great environment to talk about, like this random idea that I'm waiting to happen, or trying to think about like what the future. It doesn't necessarily affect us in our short term at Fairing at all, but it is interesting to think about in the future because. I know if you look at other markets, like the Chinese, if you think of WeChat and all these things, like they're so far in front of us for certain things. And I think the quote unquote conversational commerce has just like made everyone somewhat of a downer because it's probably one of the most overplayed like terms over the last few years.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's conversational commerce, and there's like talking to a chatbot agent. Like, I spent 10 minutes yesterday asking a question from a company where all I got were stupid responses. Right? Like, this is not as helpful as you just connecting me to a live agent. Like, the first two times, like you suggested an answer, it had absolutely nothing to do with what I was asking. And then like I had to then go to a completely different part of the site to try to actually like submit a ticket through support, right? And
So
this
on the contrary of that, I use Google OAuth for Calendly, and I was trying to switch to username and password to give someone access. And it was like chat with us, so it was a chat bot, and I was like, "Hello," and it was like, "Ask your question." Calendly's like AI, and I was just like immediately pissed, and I was just like, I'm looking to change my Google OAuth SSO login to a username and password. Like I wrote this thing, and I was like,
do it.
I know how now, but I was like, they're not gonna. This chatbot's not gonna be able to respond to the way I'm wording this, because I was trying to word it to piss it off, and it literally was like, oh, you're trying to remove your Google OAuth and replace it with a username and password, like this link, and I was like,
oh my god!
I showed my wife. I was like, look at what this thing just said. She doesn't work in tech, and she was like, cool. I was like, this is like actually the first time I've ever seen this work.
That's awesome. That's actually a great story. That's not where I thought this was going. Because the way you do is just click forgot my password, right? And then it lets you reset a password. Yeah, because that's what I realized on all these sites that generally use Google OAuth is. So in
Calendly, you have to like log in, and there's a button, and you have to contact their support. Literally, I just got a notification that they finally responded since Tuesday, so it's not a very immediate thing. But
so it's not a good solution.
It's not.
The solution I've generally found is that when I use Google to log in places, what you do is you go to reset password.
And it'll generate one?
It'll send you the email saying, click here to reset your password, and that is when you get to actually establish a password.
Got it.
And I found that works on like 95% of sites on the internet.
Yeah.
Because I oftentimes start off using Google, and then I'm like, which Gmail account did I use? Did I use my work account? Did I use my personal email account? Or if I need to share this with my EA, like how do I... So I started moving everything over to just be the email. And so I've been having to encounter this over and over again. So there's a hot tip.
We didn't switch a few emails from EnquireLabs to Fairing before we switched our domain. So we are now in this dark area with like 3 or 4 SaaS apps. So like literally this doesn't work. Like it's only Google OAuth or Microsoft. And I'm like, and it's been, you created 2 accounts now. It's just like, I digress.
Okay. Well, so I was going to say, one question I like to ask at the end of the episodes is, like, do you have a big ask? Like, what's something that would change your life or change your business if it were to happen to you? That you can just, like, kind of put out into the world or into the ether?
Yeah, one thing, like, we don't publicly talk about this, but as far as our business goes, but, like, we went the venture route in Q4 of last year, and, like, the real, like, catalyst to us doing that is, like, us expanding way beyond commerce. So we get a ton of inbound beyond commerce now, like fintech, B2B SaaS, kind of you name it. And we're not like we're unilaterally focused on commerce right now. But like the big ask, like if people are listening to this who are not in kind of e-com, those are the people that I'm trying to talk to right now, and learn more about, because that's for us going to build this larger foundation and really help us execute better. So that's the one thing that it's not directly related to e-com or anything here, but in the top of my mind is something we're looking to do.
Are there any specific verticals that are that you think are most interesting, or would be the best fit or most valuable?
Yeah, like consumer internet is super interesting to us. Like you think about you're downloading the Headspace meditation app on your phone, is one of the examples I give. That, and like we want to live where transactions live. So like literally you apply for an Amex credit card. Like we can live, thank you for applying for your car. We can help capture all this data there. Like in the short term, we already support a couple instances like that. So that's the big thing that we're really trying to prove out now, as more of like a macro strategy. So that's the one thing, like if we were to like expedite that, it would give us a lot of confidence as we start to expand.
Awesome. I mean, that's great that you had a big ask, like right off the top of your head. Because
I was just thinking about that like an hour ago.
All the time. Yeah, I was like, I asked this question, and generally people are like, "Oh, I need to think about that." And with you, I was just like, "Oh my goodness, homie has an answer immediately."
Thinking about that from like 2 to 3 today. Like that was like I was literally trying to go deep into some of these things. So we're not in like a rush to do it, but it is one of those things where like one day at a time here. Let's kind of slowly build up this use case, and it's exciting for us. Yeah.
Awesome. Great, man. Well, thanks so much for being on the show. How can people get in touch with you? What's the best place and way?
Yeah, LinkedIn or Twitter. You can just find me. It's Matt R. Bahr on Twitter. Or feel free to
Right.
email me. It's just matt@fairing.co.
Mm-hmm.
Happy to chat with anyone, like any ecom, like that. Like you've been in the space for a while too. I was a merchant for about 8 years, so I'm always happy to jam on all things commerce, whether it's related to zero party data or fairing or not.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll put that into the show notes. Um, but awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on the show. This is
Cool, man.
fun.
Thanks for the invite. We'll hopefully do this IRL next time.
Yeah, hell yeah. All right, man.
Cool, man.